All right, let's recap this episode so we can get to the good stuff. How's it going, everybody? This is Phil, and I just got finished watching episode 5 of The Mandalorian. And again, much like episode 4, this one was a little bit of a step back as far as I was concerned. I don't think it was a step back from episode 4. I think episode 4 and episode 5, they kind of are on the same level, just different types of stories. The first 3 episodes are really where this whole entire show has shined so far. But not a bad episode, but nothing that just kind of like blew me out of my shoes until the very end, which was very, very interesting. So basically, this episode starts off, we have the Mandalorian, he's in his ship and he's being chased. He's another bounty hunter is in pursuit of him. And, we basically get the old Maverick Top Gun maneuver where he hits the brakes and the bounty hunter blows right by him, and then he just incinerates him, takes him right out. And then we get him coming up on the old tried and true, when all else fails, head to Tatooine. So we get the Mos Eisley spaceport once again on screen, which... I mean, look, we've got new stuff introduced, new planets, new areas, new regions, new ships, new characters. I don't mind a throwback like this. This show does callbacks all the time, and that's been proven now as far as what we've seen. So coming back to this planet, we've seen it in the first 2 trilogies, and now we've seen it in this show, and I think we're going to see it again in episode 9. So it always comes back to Tatooine. So Mandalorian lands and he goes into docking bay 37, gets down to that spaceport, and the mechanic, you get the pit droids from the prequel trilogy. They come out and they start working on the ship, and he says no droids. He's got an issue with droids, right? We saw that established in episode 1 with IG-11. So he's got some kind of a past, some kind of a weird thing going on there with droids. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's kind of like Will Smith and iRobot. He's got some kind of an issue here. Anyway, the owner of the docking bay, the mechanic, she says that she'll take care of the ship, but it's going to cost him. So he sets off into Mos Eisley spaceport, and again, the Mandalorian he's protective, but yet he makes really bad decisions, really bad parental decisions. He's constantly leaving this kid unattended or in the supervision of complete strangers. We saw that in episode 4, and it never works out. This kid, he doesn't sit still. He doesn't listen. He's a toddler. He's going to do what he wants to do. That's what toddlers do. I got 2 nephews. You can't tell them what to do. So... he ends up waking up, she finds him, and she's like, well, it's going to cost a little bit extra for some babysitting. Anyway, we get back to the Mandalorian, and he makes his way, as he's walking up to this door, I'm like, is that the cantina for Star Wars original, most likely? And it is. He walks in, and he's in the cantina from the original Star Wars, A New Hope, which, it is cool to see old sets revisited. But you don't want to rely too heavily on that. I mean, we're getting a lot out in episode 9, but that's a desperate attempt to kind of garner fan favor. The fans are behind this show, so I think the Mandalorian will get a little bit more of a pass, and he's only making his way through, so it's not that big a deal. They're not hinging the whole show on it. It's just a nice nod. It's fanfare. So he goes in there. And he's looking around for some work so he can get some money to repair his ship. And there's a droid behind the counter. Probably bartender's dead at this point, right? And he doesn't know of any work. The guild hasn't been on Tatooine for a while. And we see somebody sitting over there in the corner in Han's seat. And it's this gentleman, this young bounty hunter named Toro. And he's on a job, and he's trying to bring in a mercenary by the name of Fennec Shand, and she's just bad news. And bounty hunter's like, hey man, that's all on you. Mandalorian says, and he's just like, look, man, you could have the money. I just need the kill. I need the credit of the kill or the bounty so I can get into the Bounty Hunters Guild. So Mandalorian, he figures, all right, what the hell? I'll take the money. That's how I'm going to be able to get my ship repaired and pay for the cost for that and get the hell off of this place. So they go out. He has him bring a couple speeder bikes, meets him back over at Docking Bay 37. And just at that moment, he had gone in there. He'd seen that the mechanic she took, Baby Yoda, she was caring for him. And at that point, he goes out front to meet Toro with speeder bikes, and the mechanic walks out there with Baby Yoda. And he just catches a glimpse of it, but he's unaware of what this child is, or who the bounty hunter, who the Mandalorian is at this point. So they take off in pursuit, and they eventually get to the point where they locate Fennec, and she starts firing upon the Mandalorian. He's able to escape, and at that point they kind of lay low, and the Mandalorian, he's always thinking, so he's like, look, we'll wait till night. There's no sense in charging in at this point in broad daylight. She'll pick us off. There's a different strategy to apprehend this bounty. So they wait for night. They shoot across in their speeder bikes at high speed, setting off flares to throw off her scope, to blind her, and finally, they get around to her, and they capture her. Right? I mean, the long and short of it is they get their bounty. But the problem is they got 2 speeder bikes and they got 3 people, and you can't get the 2 people onto one speeder bike. Which I guess maybe it's that particular model, because in Return of the Jedi, when they give pursuit on Endor, Luke and Leia hop on the same bike and they chase after those biker scouts. So maybe this model doesn't have the capacity for 2 people. I don't know, but all said, Mandalorian, he decides he'll go get the dewback that they saw earlier, bring it back, and then from that point they'll make their way back to the spaceport with Fennec in cuffs, and then that way they'll be able to return her and he'll be able to collect his bounty. So well, the bounty hunter Mandalorian makes its way out, and then Fennec, she does what a villain normally does. They see somebody who's young and green and wet behind the ears, and they manipulate that character. Now, as far as the character of Toro is concerned, there was nothing special going on here. He looked kind of soft. He looked a little too wet behind the ears. You would think that somebody like this, trying to prove himself in this type of profession, he will be a little bit more rough around the edges, a little less pretty. He's got like the blowout. His clothes are nice and clean. I understand it's his first bounty that he's trying to get, but he looked like he wasn't going to have a very long career in this profession. So if the Mandalorian didn't show up, he would have been cut down right on the spot from this bounty hunter from Fennec. She would have, with that sniper rifle, she would have taken him clean out, and left him in the Dune Sea. So anyway, she tells him, look, this is the Mandalorian who most likely betrayed the guild, and he's got a bounty and some kind of a child or something like that. And then everything clicks and he puts it all together, and he approaches her to undo her handcuffs and blows her away, just kills her right on the spot, right? And that surprised me. I didn't see that coming. I thought that maybe he was going to release her, and then it was a double cross, going to turn into a triple cross. So I didn't really see that coming. But he fires upon her, takes off, makes his way back to Docking Bay 37 where he saw the child, and then he holds everybody hostage. Mandalorian returns. He figures out what's going on. He sees Fennec's body there. He returns to the Docking Bay, and then they basically they have a standoff, and throws down his weapon, and then he's able to create a distraction with, again, a flare, and they, he ends up taking out Toro, getting the child back, giving the mechanic all of the bounty, everything he collected, gives it to her, and then she, sends him on his way. And that's basically it. And then we get the final shot. We get to the final scene, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and we see the body of Frennick just lying there, and we see a pair of boots and a cape, and we hear this noise. Right now we hear two different noises that are indications of who this might be. Now the first one is the sound of boot spurs. It's a jangling sound. Right now, if you saw, for those of you who've watched my channel, when the trailer released for The Mandalorian, I made note of the fact that in the beginning of the trailer, he walks through past those stormtrooper helmets on the pikes, and you hear the jingle jangle of spurs, of boot spurs. And that was a thing that Ben Burtt, who, the master of sound, who worked on the Star Wars films, he gave that sound to Boba Fett to harken back to old westerns, and just to give him more presence on screen. He thought, it would give the idea of a gunslinger, a lone gunslinger, or a bounty hunter, or something of that nature. So when we see this shot of these boots and this cape, we get the sound of the spurs. The other thing that we get is there's a noise where it's just kind of like radio feedback, some kind of an electronic noise. And this noise, for those who are keen on this type of thing, if you go back to the only time I can remember this being on screen was in the special edition of A New Hope, where we get the Jabba scene, where they put Jabba back in digitally. They also placed Boba Fett in that scene digitally. And when Han is talking to Jabba the Hutt at the end, he says, you're a wonderful human being. He walks away, and Jabba the Hutt says, come on. And as he's making his way off screen, and his other thugs are with him and making his way off screen, there's a moment where Boba Fett walks into screen, and what you hear is the same radio frequency and feedback noise that you get here when at the end of episode 5 this figure walks into the screen. So we have the jingle jangle of his spurs. We have this noise that is canon, that is attributed to, well, I mean, say what you will about the special edition, it's canon. So we've seen this on screen with this character where he's emitted this radio frequency, feedback noise. So those two things are indicators right there. He has the cape on. The cape, the other thing about it, to determine whether or not this could be Boba Fett. Now they are on Tatooine, so it's always been proposed that he escaped Sarlacc's pick, so it would make sense that he would show up. And also, when he kneels down, he does have what appears to be a holster on his right side, on his hip, and Boba Fett always had, for the most part, his cape would be on the left side of his shoulder. So when we see him kneel down on screen, his right side is exposed and the cape falls on the left side. So these to me are audio and visual indicators that there's either a high probability that this is Boba Fett finally back in live action on screen, or they're trying to throw us for a loop here and make us think that it's Boba Fett and it's going to end up being somebody else. But with what they've done, with how limited it is, with the little Easter eggs and nods that they threw in there just for that few seconds, to me it's an indication of it's something to do with Boba Fett, whether it's they're tricking us or it's actually the character. I mean, as far as his jumpsuit, it was too dark to really tell. I couldn't really make out any definition in his boots as to whether or not they were the actual boots that he wore. So it wasn't. I couldn't really see that. And as far as his jumpsuit, it looked blue on screen. He wore a blue jumpsuit in The Empire Strikes Back. He wore a tan jumpsuit in Return of the Jedi. It would make sense. Blue, he's in Cloud City, and then tan, he's on Tatooine, so he's dealing with all the sand. So it looked blue on screen, at least when I was watching it. So I'm not sure. That to me is neither here nor there. I think what the jumpsuit is. I mean, it could quite possibly be that, you know, his tan jumpsuit was destroyed when he was in Sarlacc, and then when he escaped, he was left with his blue pit. He was left with his blue jumpsuit. But again, it's been so long. He could have acquired, at this point, other jumpsuits and clothing and things of that nature, and rebuilt his armor. So who knows? But anyway, that's the thing that really got me most excited about this episode. It came at the very end, and I just sat up and I was like, "Holy shit, Boba Fett!" I thought, I was like, you know what? Wouldn't it be cool if they brought Boba Fett in at the end of the show to be an antagonist? And man, I will hang my hat on this if I was right about that. But all in all, it was an okay episode. You know, these episodes, they're short, and when they're singular episodes, not building towards a bigger climax, the show feels small. Right, you feel a little bit more of it being like just for television, even though it's, you know, the effects are great, and it's still entertaining. It feels smaller with something like this. The first 3 episodes felt almost like a small movie, like a made-for-TV movie, and it had a little bit of a bigger scale to it, and it built towards that great climax. At the end of episode 3, these 2 episodes are kind of standalone episodes. Episode 4 being, you know, the Magnificent Seven type of story, and then this one just going to go out on a bounty, and there's a betrayal and that type of thing that takes place. Nothing that really blew us away. The one thing I did like about this episode over episode 4 was, even though you kind of had a feeling how the character of Toro was going to play out, the episode still was kind of open. It could have went, in a different direction, and I like the idea of trying to figure out, or just letting myself enjoy what the journey's going to be for 30 minutes to 40 minutes, as opposed to kind of seeing how it's going to play out right from the very beginning. So in that case, I like this episode a little bit more than episode 4 because of that. But all in all, fun, enjoyable. I like the nods. I like the inclusion of the potential of Boba Fett making his way back into the Star Wars canon officially live on screen. That is awesome. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan. You look at the logo of my channel, and then there's really nothing else going on in this episode as far as character development or any kind of depth or anything like that is concerned. It just kind of like moved along. It was like an episode of the week type of deal. So I can only hope that these last 3 episodes now, they really work together in concert as just a 3-episode arc, where it's like if you could just put them all together like we did the first 3 episodes, and then it ends on like a real high note with like a great cliffhanger, and then gets us really pumped up to go into season 2, and also having a satisfying conclusion to this season. So let's see what these next 3 episodes bring us. I'm really hopeful. Again, I've liked this show so far. I don't have really many complaints about it. It's been fun. And it's these last 2 episodes kind of brought it a little bit down on the pedestal that it was on, but it's still, I'm there every week, and I'm just waiting for something, like what's going to be the next big thing that's going to get me pumped up and feel real satisfying as a Star Wars fan to watch. And this was cool too. I like seeing the Tusken Raiders, and if this episode proves one thing, it's those Tusken Raiders are sneaky bastards, right? They show up out of nowhere. They did it in A New Hope. They did it in this episode. They're like desert ninjas. They just move around in silence, and then poof, they're there. Anyway, guys, that was it. Let me know what you think about this episode. Did you enjoy? What did you think of the character of Toro? What did you think of Fennec? I mean, Fennec was kind of like a one-note bad guy. You don't get the development that you would normally get in a longer format storytelling type of live action story like this. But this is what happens when you're condensing everything and there's not a lot of time for exposition. But let me know what you guys think down below. Like, comment. First time here, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys sometime soon. I'm getting this one up a lot quicker than I did the last one. And as always, be happy, be safe, be healthy. Have a great night, guys. Bye-bye.